in charge. You just take it from here.
And get me set up. Okay. Hi, Lissa. This is Jana, and I'm here with Mark Anthony, and you guys already have his intro in his on the board. So we're just going to get started. I'm going to welcome Mark, and I'll count us down, and we're going to be going live. Not live, but we're going to be recording. So 3, 2, 1. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show. I got to tell you, I have been so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Jana. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be on the Best Holistic Show, and I've so been looking forward to meeting you in person over the internet.
How everybody's meeting these days.
It's true. You know, we were chatting before I went on, and thank goodness we have this miracle of technology because you know I normally am on the road 20 plus weeks a year doing public appearances, mediumship demonstrations, speaking engagements. And because of the internet, I'm able to continue reaching out to people, conducting my readings, and being on shows like yours. So I've continued my tour from the comfort of my own home, I guess.
I love it. I'm kind of grateful you had to slow down a little bit so I could grab a hold of you and get you on the show.
Oh, thank you.
So one of the things we do on Oh My Health There's Hope is my whole message is to put that ripple effect of hope out into the world. And so I ask all my guests if they can share their message of hope.
My message of hope, if you'll indulge me for a moment, is I was born a medium. I was born into a family where both my parents had these abilities, and it's run in the family for centuries. I know I can track it back to the 1890s on both sides. And my dad was a Navy SEAL and a NASA engineer. That's what brought my family to Florida. My mom was a city girl from, New York and New Jersey. And so here we were in Florida. And when my mother passed, even though I'm sensitive to the presence of spirits, it was devastating. And Jana, no matter how much you may know about spirituality or feel connected or even have abilities, how much faith you have, how much you pray, there comes a time when all of that drains from you in a pit of despair and panic. And that's called grief. And I remember it was about 2 weeks after my mother passed. And I was practicing law full time then, and I was coming back from the courthouse to my office. And it's like everything drained out of me, my hope, any semblance of joy. I was crippled by grief. And I just knew that I had to pull over. I was driving and I pulled off the road into this little strip mall, and I pulled under the shade of a tree. And I just sat there with the engine running. And then all of a sudden there was this flash. And the thing is, Jana, I don't know if there was a flashlight in the car or one in my mind's eye. And I felt this presence, and I looked to my right to the passenger seat, and I saw the silhouette of my mother in this silver white light. And her voice filled my head. And she said, "Mark, you've been given the gift of mediumship so that you would not be crushed by grief. But now you must use that gift to help others who are coping with their grief." And at that moment, Jana, my faith, my hope, my joy returned. And it was one of those defining moments in my life where I realized why I'm here. And it then filled my head with her voice that she said, "You must help people understand that God exists. The afterlife exists, that our souls are immortal living spirits, that we can communicate with those souls, and that we will be reunited in the love, in the light that you call God." And I just sank back in my seat, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God. And that's the hope. That's the hope. People need to understand that when a loved one dies, that person did not disintegrate into the void and cease to exist, that he or she is pure energy, and that while the body may no longer function, the soul, which is housed in the brain, not created by it, only housed, is transferred to another dimension, another frequency, but that doesn't mean we can't communicate with it. So Jana, that I believe is my message of hope.
I love that. I really do love that story. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I want to talk about people in their grief. I've been to a couple of shows before that were Anthony Edwards. I went to Teresa Caputo's show, but I went more as entertainment because I knew there was thousands of people there. It wasn't that I didn't believe in what she did. I totally did. But I knew there was thousands of people there, and it was more for a show. But when I went there, the very first time I went, it was Anthony Edwards. And I remember when
John Edward.
Oh, John Anthony. John
right.
John
Anthony Edwards, the actor.
That's right. That's
right.
All
right. No. Because I've met him a couple times. So yeah.
Well, at his show, when I went there, he took a break and everybody stood up, and, I looked around the room and I didn't realize what was going on around the room, but people were they were clutching pictures of their deceased family members or loved ones. And at that moment, I'm a sensitive and empath. It like overwhelmed me with their grief. And one person told me during the break that he had been following him for years, hoping for a reading to hear from his son. At what point is it for us healthy to let them move on with our lives? Because I felt so sad when I couldn't go back anymore. When I realized why people were going, it wasn't like me for wow, I want to see what they say.
Yeah, that's a really good question. At what point do we have to let go of the physical? In my first book, Never Letting Go, I've heard from so many people that have written it that one of the most important chapters is going from a physical to a spiritual relationship. And in the journey through grief, I know Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote about the 5 stages of grief, and I agree with her. But there's actually 2 phases of grief as well. The first phase is shock. That's right in the wake of what happens. I was in shock when I had the visitation from my mother. That's when you first learn of the death. You're overwhelmed. You can't think, can't eat, can't sleep. You're just, it feels like you're outside of your body watching the world go by. And eventually the shock will fade. Maybe it'll be in a week, 2 weeks, possibly a month, but then the trauma sets in. And the trauma is what we have to learn to live with. And that's that pain, that agony, the regrets, the remorse. It's just that overwhelming feeling of sorrow. And so what happens is a lot of people, they become, the term is a psychic junkie. They want to go from psychic to psychic to psychic to get a message, get a message, get a message. And the reason for that, and I certainly understand it, and I'm not criticizing people who do that, but they have to understand that what they're doing is trying to go to as many psychic readings as possible because they're trying to recreate the physicality, the physical relationship with their loved one, instead of allowing the natural progression of grief to where you realize the physical relationship is gone. But now your relationship is one of a spiritual nature. And so certainly communication with a loved one through a medium, which I call interdimensional communication, is extremely important. And it's a very, very necessary for many people therapeutic step in the journey through grief. But you still have to reach out to your faith community, or go to secular counseling if that helps you, and grasp the reality that your loved one is no longer physically here. And that's when you really begin to heal, is when you acknowledge that your relationship is no longer one of a physical nature, but now it's one of a spiritual nature.
I love that transition, and that is beautifully said. I think it's a lot in your book too, by the way.
It is. Well, yeah, it's important in my books. And what I try to do, when I was sitting in law school and trudging through books on federal income taxation and civil procedure and property law, I remember looking at this and saying, someday I'm going to write books, and I am never going to inflict this upon anyone. It was so boring. And but I also, not just as a medium, but as an attorney and a man of science. And I've had an interest in quantum physics, archaeology, theology, medicine, along with spirituality, my entire life. And that's what I do in my books is I combine all these disciplines, explain spirit communication in a logical and rational basis. That it has a foundation in science. It's based on sound scientific principles. But so I can write that, but it has to be illustrated with a dynamic or gripping or very poignant story. Because let's face it, I mean, very few people want to read an algebra textbook, but they do want to read a story that touches their heartstrings. And if they can learn and grow along the way, then that's the objective of a writer.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And as a matter of fact, I'm such a fan of your books that we just ordered one that I could take on vacation with me. But we're going to put those in the show notes because I want everyone to have access easily to those books, because it does give you this incredible relationship with the next phase of our journey. And so I love that because I've always had that very comfortable.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I talk to my grandkids about me passing, letting them know that that's part of life. Be happy for me. I know you'll be sad. That's normal, but be happy that we had this time together and we'll be together again.
Wait a second. You're a grandmother?
I have 7 grandchildren.
Oh my God. I'm saying, I know we're in the Me Too movement and all that, but you don't look like your grandmother. My grandmother looked like her grandmother. She used to knit and all that. It's like, you look like you're about to go play tennis, So that's a compliment. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And they're not little either. They're 14 to 3. Awesome. So tell me a little bit, like this is a weird question, but I have a lot of people say, oh, if they're a medium or a psychic, why don't they just go get the lottery numbers? And they don't really understand have you not heard that, right?
Well, what they need to realize is it's not like I don't ask. It's like, and it's so funny because my parents, they used to like to go to casinos, and Mom used to win a lot. She'd go, oh, I would just be walking by and I knew it was that machine I had to put my money in. I remember I was with her one time and bam, $5,000 came out of it. I'm like, wow, Mom. But it's not for that. See, people say, oh, just get lottery numbers. I mean, I'm certainly like, hey, Mom, if you want to, give me Powerball or lottery numbers or whatever, I'll do good. I promise everybody. I would. I mean, why not? But the thing is, Jana, that's not what it's for. And spirits couldn't care less about material objects and material things. I've got a lot of Egyptian artifacts or, recreations around the house, and I've studied ancient cultures, the Egyptians, Mayans, Aztecs, the Hindus, Greeks and Romans and Incas. And guess what? They thought you could bring it with you. They created these incredible tombs, loaded them with treasure that got plundered. And once the spirit leaves the material world, think of your souls as a drop of water. And when we die, that drop of water plunges into the eternal sea of consciousness. In other words, the other side. They couldn't care less about material objects because they don't need them. It doesn't matter. So when we sit here with our preoccupation and our lust for materialism, they know that in the bigger scheme of things, that isn't important. Now, that being said, money may not buy happiness, but it does make misery easier to endure. And money, though, is to be the servant, not the master. And I believe that that's one of the lessons that spirits attempt to impart upon us. If you look at the great spiritual teachers, look at Buddha, look at Jesus, both of them came from royal lineage. Buddha was a prince who gave it all up to seek enlightenment and went into the wilderness. I think it was for like 44 to 46 days. Was tempted by Mara, the Lord of Illusion. Jesus was of the royal lineage of the house of David through his mother Mary. And we could spend a whole show on this. In fact, one of the presentations I give is about what the Star of Bethlehem was in astrological terms. And, we all know the Christmas story where, the wise men come and they meet with Herod the Great, and Herod's like, well, where is this child? Where is this king? Well, there was a reason that Herod was afraid of Jesus, is because he was the line of David and certainly had the lineage, if he had wanted to use that and become immensely successful and filled, and wealthy. But with people like Buddha, Jesus, Gandhi, St. Francis of Assisi, he was a young nobleman who went through actually a near-death experience and emerged as St. Francis, or the man we know as St. Francis. The people that are truly enlightened, truly spiritual, they're not money-grubbing, they are not materialistic. Like when we see these televangelists or some of these gurus from India that come and they're driving around in Rolls Royces, and these televangelists flying around in their Learjets, I think they're missing the point, because it isn't about money, it isn't about lust for materialism, it is about something of a far greater value, and that's our spiritual connection with the infinite.
I not only do I 100% agree, I remember when I was living in my very materialistic world, and then I got sick. I got really sick. And when I was told I had no hope and I was going to be leaving this world in a few weeks, I would have given everything I owned, everything, for one more memory with my grandkids or one more memory with my family. And when I did get those moments, I realized that stuff, I'm not taking it with me. It doesn't matter how much I have, how many great shoes I have or purses I have. At the end of the day, it's all those incredible memories I'm leaving behind and I'm taking with me. So that's what my whole life is about.
That's the true wealth is love. I mean, Jana, how many people on their deathbed, as they're gasping for their last breaths, say, if only I'd gone into the office more?
Well, I think there might be a few, but that's a whole different book. But the majority, no, that is not their wish.
True. Fair enough.
So what I want you to tell everyone is exactly what a psychic medium is. Like, do you speak to spirits? Do they follow you around? Do they just pop up? Like, do they let you sleep?
All the above, but let me qualify all of that. There's three types of mediums. There are physical mediums, and I've yet to see one that actually persuades me, because I've been to these conferences where people claim they're physical mediums, and a physical medium supposedly ectoplasm emits from their body and forms an image of the person communicating. And there is historical documentation of people like that. But the charlatans that I've seen make everyone sit in a completely dark room, and you're restrained because you can't disturb the ectoplasm, and they make these goofy voices and blare loud rock and roll in between, saying, "Oh, we need the vibration for the ectoplasm." That's garbage. Okay, if this were real, I can understand doing it in lower light level so we could actually see this phenomenon happening. I know that in the early to mid 20th century, Helen Duncan was documented as being an actual physical medium, and people saw ectoplasm emerge from her body and form the image of people communicating. Then there's what's known as a trance medium. That's what we call it in Great Britain. In the United States, they're more commonly known as a channeler. And what a channeler does is he or she goes into a trance, ergo trance mediumship, and spirits speak through that person. I'd say the most famous trance medium in the past 100 years would have been Edgar Cayce. And Edgar Cayce is attributed with coming up with hundreds of cures and incredible data and information. In fact, when he died, his family and he had founded the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment. There's several branches of it around the United States, and the headquarters is in Virginia Beach, and it's a wonderful, wonderful organization. I speak there. I've spoken there, I think, 3 or 4 times at their various conferences. And so Edgar Cayce was a legitimate trance medium. The type of medium that I am is known as a mental medium, which means that a spirit transmits information into my brain. They send forth an electromagnetic impulse. And then when that impulse reaches my neural net in my brain, it is then converted into recognizable concepts based on my memories, feelings, and cultural associations. So in my mind's eye, I will see images, I will hear things in my mind's ear, I will taste, smell, touch, I feel physical sensations of how the person passed, because all those are identifiers. Once they do that, then they lock onto me and they start transmitting more in-depth information, perhaps about the person that I'm doing the reading for, their health condition. They may make suggestions on treatments. They can talk about sometimes future events or what's going on with your life. Your question is, do they pop in on me all the time? They could if I allowed that to happen. And a disciplined and professional medium sets forth the parameters. In other words, I'm either doing this or I'm not. And you have to do that, Jana, to protect your mental well-being. Not that you're going to go crazy. I mean, I suppose you could, but do you leave the doors and windows of your house open 24/7? No. So why do it to your brain? And also, if you do that all the time, you're constantly, it will actually start to physically and mentally exhaust you, therefore denigrating the quality of the contact. So I do no more than 2 readings a day, and I send forth a message, I'm doing this, and then when I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it, and they respect my barriers.
So you have like a do not disturb sign.
I do. It doesn't always work though, because sometimes you get a very persistent spirit that wants to get a message through. And that's happened to me on a number of occasions. Like I know on a lot of TV shows where someone runs into a pizza parlor and someone's eating pizza and go, hi, I'm a medium, blah, 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 and they fling a reading at someone. Well, that's TV, okay?
Right.
And you're out in the Studio City, Hollywood area.
Right.
Let's face it, reality TV isn't real.
It's unscripted, scripted.
Scripted, right. There's a whole camera crew with them, and there's all these, 8 different camera angles, perfect makeup, perfect lighting, perfect sound. and yeah, that just happens with, spontaneously. And I certainly understand that. And I'm not saying that the mediums on TV aren't legit, but it's still television. But I think it is unethical and inappropriate to just walk up to somebody who has not asked for a reading and just fling it at somebody. That's like going up to you and saying, Jana, I think you need a root canal. Hold it down while I get a pair of pliers. You don't do that. You don't do that to somebody.
100%. I don't think everybody is ready to receive that. So no. I totally 100%. And when I see it on TV, I don't watch it because it's awkward sometimes. It's when they walk in and they just like, oh, do you have an uncle who just passed? And they're like, yeah, it looks awkward. I do.
8 different camera angles. Wow, yeah. That was real. Well, and I'm on TV a lot, but the television shows that I'm on, I'm doing the readings before a live audience. And it's funny what can happen sometimes. Bless this lady. She's an older woman, and I was drawn to her, and she stood up, and I said, spirit of a younger male coming through, feels like he could be your son. And she's staring at me, and I go, and he keeps saying cross, cross. I'm seeing an image of a cross. I'm getting the word cross. Could be red cross, cross. No. And we go to commercial break, okay? Because TV is a 7-minute segment and 4 minutes of commercials. So she's standing there in the television audience, and her husband sitting next to her goes, well, our last name is Cross. And I go, you mean like your son's last name? And they look at each other like, oh yeah. and the host of the show, she's like, oh good Lord. And so we come back on, she goes, so on the break, Mark Anthony said that the word cross, and you figured out that was your last name. We're like, yeah. She goes, Mark, why don't you go to somebody else? And the thing is, these poor people, they were so terrified being on TV, being the center of attention. I mean, you're on TV a lot. I'm on TV a lot. And even though we do it regularly, it's still nerve-wracking, because you got to be on, you got to look cool, you got to do this, you got, but for people who aren't used to this, she was so scared she couldn't even recognize her own name. So in a situation like that, it would be inappropriate to do a reading. She would be better suited for a one-on-one where she doesn't have all that tension. And then that way, I can spend the time and get get as much information as possible. But, that's the difference between these reality shows and reality.
I love it. The sad thing is too, when you go to those group ones, everybody relates to something they're saying, and they'll be like, it's me. A million hands will go up. It's me. No.
I was doing a session and I said, there's a 6-year-old girl. It looks like a little girl. It looks like she's maybe 6 years old. And I feel that she died from heart failure. And this lady jumps up in the audience. She goes, my father died from heart failure. And she came right out of my mouth. Was your father a 6-year-old girl? Okay. But she was one of these, me. And what's happening is when people do that. And so for folks that go see mediums like myself, please don't do that. If all of a sudden you get at least 3 facts that line up, then raise your hand. All right. I mean, to go to a place, say there's somebody here died of a heart attack. Well, heart failure is the #1 cause of death, I believe, in the country. We start saying, okay, I'm getting a heart failure. It looks like a woman between these ages. I'm getting something toward the latter part of October, and she's giving me this name. And if those things start lining up. Also, it's very important to realize, Jana, that during a reading, a lot of things are not going to immediately make sense. There's the period after the reading that I call the unfolding. And think of the readings like a flower, and it blossoms and blooms and unfolds and begins to reveal more about itself. And this can take hours, days, weeks, and even longer. And this happened about a week ago. So this is a brand new story right here. You heard it on Best Holistic with Jana. I was doing a session for this lady over the phone, because you can do phone readings because spirits move at the speed of light. And her mother spirit came through and started talking about, I said, it's not your son, but it's somebody like on your son's level that needs his eyes checked. And she goes, well, my nephew wears glasses and he's been complaining about his eyes. I said, you need to take him to the eye doctor. And she goes, oh, during this COVID crisis? I said, well, the message is you got to take him to the eye doctor. And I go, now I'm seeing Little Richard singing, Tutti Frutti, ah, Rudy, Tutti Frutti, and I'm getting this whole thing. She goes, well, we don't like Little Richard. That song means nothing to me. I said, look, my job is to convey the information, just write it down. And she was very good-natured about it. Well, then about a week and a half later, I got this email from her, and she said, well, I talked my sister into taking my nephew to the eye doctor. So she said, all right, you can take him. So I took him to the eye doctor, and as soon as we walked into the doctor's waiting room, on the radio, it was playing Tutti Frutti, ah, Rudy, and with Little Richard. And she goes, okay, Mom, I got the message.
I love it. I do love it. And I do think that we don't receive it right away, that it opens up to us. So I love that it's just a message that keeps giving.
Yeah.
Well, I am, by the way, if you're looking to reach out to medium, I know it's really hard sometimes to have that kind of trust and rapport when doing that. And sometimes those big group settings, the likelihood of you getting a reading is like winning the lottery because there's like hundreds of people there and they're only able to do a few. Reach out to someone like Mark and schedule a private one where it's really going to be centered around you and what you want. And it's not in a big mass of people.
It's true. And one of the phenomena that I've been notating is in the larger group settings. And certainly I've done the, hundreds of people, but I myself, okay, and I know my manager is going to really throttle me for saying this, I prefer 100 to 200 people max, okay? Because that way, and routinely, when I get information, it's really fast. I can usually get to 30 plus people in a night. But what I've also noticed is that a group of spirits will come in together that either have a commonality between themselves or the people that they're targeting in the audience is a commonality, because spirits are linked to other spirits, linked to other spirits, linked to other spirits. This is what I mean by the collective consciousness. It's like a hive mind, although they maintain their individuality. Let me give an example. I was doing a session, and all of a sudden I get the word Paisley. Paisley. I go, does the word Paisley make sense? 3 people raised their hand. It was about 80 or 90 people. It was in a very quaint bookstore. It was really nice. And the first lady said, I was at the mall today, and I felt I needed to go into Macy's and buy a Paisley skirt. I don't know why, but I bought a Paisley skirt. And then the second person was a gentleman, and he said, my dad died recently, and I was going through his stuff yesterday, and I wanted his Paisley tie. I don't know why, but I just wanted his Paisley tie. And the third person said, well, my name is Paisley. and so all of a sudden, the spirits connected with the Paisleys came through. This lady's, whoever it was, I think it was her mother, the gentleman's father came through and a bunch of messages, and then the person for that. What was the common denominator? Was the concept of Paisley. Then I was doing another session, and I started getting young men. I said they all died by suicide. And I said between the ages of 17 and 27. 8 hands go up, and 8 families were there. All of them had a young man that matched that description, and the spirits came in one at a time. Boom, boom, boom. And so what I've noticed is that, yes, spirits travel in groups, but see, our limited human mind is only capable of grasping one concept at a time, whereas a spirit has this infinite spectrum. So think of me, I'm a radio, and I'm tuned into, 100.7 on the FM dial, and they're hitting me with the whole FM radio band. Well, they know that I have limitations, that humans have limitations. So that's why they will come in and do what I have termed collective consciousness communication. So therefore, those 8 families needed that message. Those 3 people connected to the concept of Paisley needed that. And I could go on, but this is one of the things that I study and that I've come to understand in communication with spirits.
I love it. What are you doing now that we're in COVID?
Well, I'm continuing my tour online, and so that's why I'm here on Best Holistic Show with you, Jana. So I consider this a tour event. I've got several other shows booked up. I'm doing a discussion next week with a friend of mine, Reverend Anthony Profeta. We formed a group on Facebook called Quantum Vibrations, and we're doing a seminar called No One is Born a Bigot. And it's a discussion about prejudice, racism, and how to raise our vibration to overcome these outdated, outmoded, arcane feelings of racial superiority. So that's one of the things. I recently spoke on shared death experiences through the International Association Near Death Studies website. I did an event for helping parents heal. I've got another one scheduled. And then, of course, I've got several other radio shows. And if people want to find out, please, you can sign up for my newsletter and go to my calendar of events on my website, which is evidenceofeternity.com. And, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, all of that. And certainly do the same for Jana, okay, and this show. Because right now, social media is more important than ever. We have to listen to the scientists. Look, nobody likes wearing a mask, but if you don't like wearing a mask, you're just going to love a ventilator.
I love that. I love that. You know what? I am a huge fan of yours. Like, I became a huge fan as soon as I laid my fingers on your book. So I'm excited that you were able to come here and share with us. Definitely go give him some love on his website, get his newsletter. And if you're wanting to connect with someone who's passed, if for anything else to have some closure, understanding, or to just move on to that next phase of what you're supposed to be doing on your journey, connect with him. I know you can book right on your website, correct?
I do. And phone readings are just as accurate as in-person readings.
100%.
100%, because the phone moves at the speed of light, and so do spirits. So they're able to zip back and forth between us. And it's really nice too, because you're in the comfort of your own home. You can sit there in your favorite chair and be relaxed. You don't have to travel. and I can put on my headphones and get into my zone. And it's one of the private readings. More than one spirit's going to come through. I had a reading where I had 24 spirits come through, 21 people, 2 dogs, and Rusty the horse.
My husband's going to love you that he could talk to passing pets.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's funny because I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I was supposed to be a Catholic priest and all this. But it's funny because my parents, we'd have these discussions at dinner, and even though my dad's family was Baptist, and his great grandfather was a Baptist minister in Pennsylvania, and my mother's family, they were very Catholic, but we were like, we would talk about Krishna and Buddha and Jesus at dinner, and Mom's avatar, she called Saint Jude and Saint Anthony her avatars. And so we had a broader take on, we had an interfaith approach. And so I didn't feel that the clergy was the right place for me. But I certainly do believe in God. And it's very important to have that focus. And there is this arrogance in Christianity that only humans have a soul. And the truth of the matter is, energy is what makes all living beings alive. And energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. And that applies to our soul housed in the brain. And if you don't believe an animal has a soul, look into the eyes of your pet. And I don't mean a lizard, okay? These people that have lizards and snakes, I'm sorry, that's just, ugh. Okay, to me, pets either have feathers or fur, and they're happy to see you. Not, I want to swallow you whole. But, and I'm not saying that reptiles don't have souls, but what I have found is that any being capable of the emotion of love is capable of spirit communication. And I've communicated with dogs, cats, horses, birds, guinea pigs, hamsters, bunnies, even a bear.
Oh.
That was a real that one. So I'm doing a reading for this family, and they were awesome. But they're real country. They're from the center part of Florida, and they talk like this, and growing up down here, I got a lot of friends. And the funny thing is, I went to a law school in the deep South and Mercer University. And the biggest mistake anyone can make is thinking that someone talks like this is stupid. So I got this country family there, and it was the mother, her son, and 2 daughters. And all of a sudden, the father who had passed comes through. And I'm describing him, and they're like, yep. And the son was he was the spokesperson for the family. And I go, there's a big black bear next to your father. The son looks at the mother and goes, well, Daddy done shot himself a big old black bear once. And I'm like, well, I've never communicated with a bear before. And then I get this message from the bear that sometimes you're the predator and sometimes you're the prey. And so I conveyed that, and the family was like, huh. And I go, it looks like they're fine with each other. Apparently the bear doesn't hold it against Daddy that he shot him, So it was really, really quite amazing. And the thing about this spirit communication, Jana, I mean, I'm used to doing it, but every reading is unique and everyone is a challenge. And so, that's why I just absolutely thank God every day for allowing me to have this ability, because being able to help people, but also to see how infinite the communication is and how infinite our possibilities actually are.
I love it. This is a perfect way to end this show, because that was a beautifully said. Thank you so much, Mark, for being a part of Oh My Health, There Is Hope. And you give the perfect message of hope, even in the afterlife, right? Thank you so much.